Today we're talking about how life gets easier when you stop trying as hard. I've thought about how in my career there have been times in my life when I thought I had to do everything myself. If I was assigned a task, I would try to do a good job at the task. But what was really hard for me was being able to get somebody else to do a task just because I asked. And increasingly, I've realized it's not about being able to do something well. That's not really what makes a huge difference in your success in life. It's about being able to communicate with others. And more specifically, it's not really about having excellent communication skills. It's more about having the courage to be candid about what you need and why what you're asking for actually matters, not for me, but for us. And that's just about understanding the truth of why what you do matters. Because if you truly believe that what you're doing matters as part of something greater than self, and you need other people to help you accomplish your mission, and it's truly a mission which benefits everyone involved, then it's not hard at all to ask people to join in that cause. It's when you don't believe in the mission and you think it's all about you that there is a sense of doubt. Because after all, if all I'm doing is trying to manipulate somebody so that I don't have to do the work, then that feels a little bit disingenuous. So you have to believe in what you're doing. And you also have to have the courage to not care about what other people think. Sometimes you just have to tell the truth. If somebody isn't doing what they should be doing, it's not wrong to call them out on it directly. If you need someone to help you accomplish something and it's in your purview to ask, then you shouldn't feel a sense of shame or guilt about that. And sometimes there's a tendency to think, well, if somebody doesn't report to me, then I guess I shouldn't ask them to do something because I don't have authority to ask them to do something. I'm not their manager. And that's actually not really true, because you don't have to have rank over somebody to ask them to give you a hand. You know, we had a meeting the other day at work, and we brought in some food for people to eat for lunch, and we were having this meeting in the back of the building. And I knew I'd called in for Jimmy John's to deliver these sandwiches, and they're going to show up. So I could have left the meeting and gone up there out front to wait around for this delivery. But I didn't. I just asked somebody up front to bring the sandwiches back to us when they arrived. It's a simple thing, but it illustrates how, in that particular case, for me, all I had to do was ask somebody to do something for us. It wasn't a big inconvenience for them. It was just one sentence of saying, hey, could you please do me a favor? It wasn't about rank, wasn't about anything like that. It's just asking somebody to lend you a hand because they're there and they can't. So instead of that particular thing being maybe 15 minutes out of my day. It didn't take any time out of my day at all. And that's the kind of thing which illustrates how your day can very quickly be filled with a lot of things which you don't have time for. Or your day can be filled with a lot of spare time too. Spare time which you can spend on listening or serving instead of doing menial tasks, if you know how to get into the habit of using the resources you have at your disposal. And quite often in our life, there's a lot more resources at our disposal than we realize, and we just lack the courage to use them effectively because we always feel like maybe it's an imposition to ask, or maybe it would be better or easier if we just did it ourselves. Sometimes it can feel like if you're talking about a more technical task, it's easier to just do it yourself than it is to teach somebody else how to do it too. But the reality is, ultimately, you need other people to help you be successful in life. And if you can't teach other people to do their part, the solution isn't to do it yourself. It's to hold them accountable to do their part, to pull their weight one way or another. Honesty is a really, really powerful tool in your arsenal to deal with things promptly, to not be afraid to involve all sorts of people and ask for a favor when you need one. Don't worry about being an imposition. Don't worry about whether people like it or not. And don't worry about whether you have the official rank necessary to ask somebody to do something. Because the reality is, we all, especially in the environment of a business, we're all there to serve, not ourselves, but the needs of the organization, the needs of the many. And if somebody isn't willing to do their part to serve something greater than their self, and they're offended because you ask them to, that's their problem, not yours. And that's one of the greatest lessons that I would have to say I've learned over the years. You have to be honest about people to their face. You have to be honest with people when there's something wrong, when they're doing something that they shouldn't be doing, or when you need them to do more. Don't be afraid to call an audible. And also don't be afraid to ask for help. Because if you look at how executives run their businesses, very seldom do they try to be the best at any given specific task. That's not really their role. Their role is to find other people who they believe in and to empower those people to become specialists in their field. And if you can't learn how to empower other people and you always want to be the solution to everything yourself, you're going to be self-limiting yourself and also limiting other people. Because nobody really enjoys working for a leader who doesn't actually empower them to do anything. And there are leaders who are like that. People who feel like everything that happens has to be run through them. They have to be always in control. And so they don't empower anyone on their teams to take responsibility for any outcome or any decision. And that makes people throw up their hands and say, well, okay, then I guess I'll do nothing. I'll let you do it all because you don't want to empower me or trust me to take responsibility without you being kind of like that helicopter parent, right? So sometimes less is more. I remember a long time ago now, I was a department manager at Walmart. And at that time, being a department manager seemed like a significant privilege to have this authority as a supervisor. And I was given one employee, one associate who would work for me and be in my area, and it would be my responsibility to give her direction of what sort of tasks she would need to do that day and things like that. And I'd never supervised anyone before. So this seemed like a power trip and a great privilege to have someone reporting to me. And I remember thinking to myself, I need to plan out every single thing, every minute of her day. This associate is going to need to know what to do. And I've got to make sure that her time is used effectively, because if I don't make sure that she's using her time effectively, then I'm not going to be doing my job as a leader. And I learned after a certain amount of time that the key to success was not to tell this individual everything that needed to be done. It was actually to treat her more like an equal and to learn how to not give specific direction, but more general direction. And then to trust that that individual would have the common sense and the ability to do what needed to be done and to ask for help if more help was needed. And sometimes imagine how much easier it is if all you're doing is saying, hey, can you take responsibility for this project, do whatever needs to be done, and get it finished. The expectation is that you're going to do this. And then you walk away and you trust that they're going to do it. And if they need more help or more guidance or connection to more resources, they will be responsible to ask. But it's not your job to tell them every single step they have to take, every single mouse click that they make, every single decision they undertake. Your job isn't to replace their autonomy as a human being and to make them some sort of a drone. It's about empowering people and then trusting that they actually are going to be able to do what's in everyone's best interest without being micromanaged. And so being able to ask, being able to communicate, being able to convey expectations and hold people accountable is a lot more important than being really good at doing things yourself. I remember there was a time when I was the manager of the fresh areas, again at a Walmart store, and we had a lot of people working in all of those combined areas like deli and bakery and produce and the meat department and all of that stuff. And I recall there was a period of time when my life was actually pretty easy there. Things went pretty smoothly. And the reason was because I had a lot of people who were loyal to each other and they felt valued and they enjoyed their job within reason. And they felt like they were taken care of one way or another. You know, there were things like attendance, for example. If somebody needed to take a day off and they weren't able to make it in, I would usually authorize them to do that. And in turn, quite often, they would wind up being willing to do me a favor in return. If somebody else happened to fall off and not be there, it wasn't usually very hard to find somebody to fill that empty spot, because one favor wound up being turned into another favor, and it all just seemed to work out pretty well. The point I'm getting at is I never actually became very good at knowing how to run the deli fryer. And I learned rather quickly that I didn't have time to know how to do all of those small details. Maybe I should have spent more time learning how to do some of those things. But the reality is I didn't need to know how to do all of those things because I had people there who were good at doing those things and training other people how to do those things. So I didn't have to do it all myself. And so it wasn't about learning how to be good at the fryer. wasn't good about being able to cook fried chicken. It was about making sure I never really actually needed to be the one back there cooking fried chicken. And the way I wound up being able to have people on my team that were working well together ultimately comes back to valuing people and empowering them instead of trying to do everything myself. Of course, I personally, throughout my career, have had different levels of success in different roles, but no matter what role you're in, I think it's important to realize that communication is more important than skill in a technical task. And being honest with people sooner rather than later is also a skill that cannot be understated the importance of. If you think that you're going to do yourself any favors by kicking the can down the road and making up for someone else's shortcomings, not calling an audible and not calling them out when they're in the wrong, well, that's not true. You should always be honest with people when you need something, honest with them when they're failing, and trust your judgment. Because you know what the truth is? There's always people that'll say, well, you think you see something wrong, but you really don't, and you need to prove it to me. And there's a lot of people who will try to act like you have to go to court and provide some sort of complicated documentation to make a simple point. The reality is, if somebody appears to be disgruntled and unwilling to help and they don't accomplish anything, you don't really need to write a college thesis to call an audible on it. Sometimes you just call a spade and tell the truth of how you see it. And if somebody doesn't like it, well, that's their problem. So be honest. Don't try to bear every burden yourself. And don't be afraid to ask for help when you need it, because asking for help is usually not a sign of the absence of ability. It's actually more often a sign of the ability to lead. And I think if you build a network of people who you can ask for help, you're in a much better position than if you're always trying to bear everything on your own shoulders. And finally, make sure that you're not being controlling, being manipulative, and mistaking an ego trip for leadership. Because trying to control and manipulate people isn't a sign of good leadership. It's just a sign of poor character. And in the end, when you empower people, that will pay better dividends than when you try to control them. It's amazing how much power the golden rule has, that you do unto others as you wish they would do to you. It's easy to sometimes look at life through the lens of, what's going to get me ahead, instead of looking at it through the lens of what's right. But if you do look at life through the lens of what is right, what do you believe to be right, usually you'll wind up making the right decisions overall. Even though you'll have some missteps along the way, you'll have some miscalculations, you'll have some poor judgment. If everything you do through the lens of asking that question, what do I truly believe in my heart to be right? Most likely, you're probably going to make the right decisions. As always, on your adventure, best of luck till next time. And thanks so much for watching.